We are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Kellyanne, and I'm a bookseller here at Mysterious Galaxy. Tonight, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our authors. We are joined by Nghi Vo in celebration of her latest novella, Into the Riverlands. Into the Riverlands is the next installment in the Singing Hills cycle. She's also the author of the standalone novels, The Chosen and the Beautiful and Siren Queen. If you haven't purchased your copy of Into the Riverlands, you can do so by clicking that green button below our video that says buy books with signed book plates. And also, while supplies last, that will come with a neat exclusive enamel pin. We are also joined tonight by Shelley Parker-Chan, the author of the widely acclaimed historical fantasy novel, She Who Became the Sun. Before I turn off my camera and let our authors get to it, if you haven't joined us for a virtual event, on the right-hand side, you'll find our lovely chat section. You're free to kind of write comments as the event goes on, talk to our authors that way. As I said before, there's the green buy books button below our video, which you can buy books through Mysterious Galaxy that way. And most importantly, there's the ask a question button below that. If you click that, you can write whatever questions you have for our authors, and they'll get to them in the second half of the event. And don't forget that you can also upvote questions that you want to see answered. So with that, I'm going to turn off my camera and let the event get started. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's do this.
All right.
So, yeah, I think this is the first time we have been one-on-one in conversation.
Yeah, I think
So
we've mostly
Nghi,
just
you
kind of
have-
quibbled in green rooms before this.
Yep, that's true, waved in passing. So you have Into the Riverlands, and it's out now. So that's a third in the Singing Hills cycle. And the word cycle intrigues me because it implies it's not a trilogy or it's not finished. So perhaps there'll be more in this world. Well, maybe, yeah, you could say, is it going to be the end?
The way it works actually is that my agent and my editor are much smarter than I am. So basically what happened was I wrote the Empress of Salt and Fortune, which was a standalone that I wrote very quickly because Tor.com doesn't ask for agents in its novellas division, which I didn't have at the time. And then, it got published, I got agented. And at some point, I believe it was Roshi Chen who said, could this be more? And I said, yeah, I like money. This can absolutely be more. And she, I believe, was the one who came up with the idea of calling it the Singing Hills cycle. And at the moment, I don't know how many pieces it's going to be. I don't know. I know vaguely where it's going to end, but there are a lot of pieces we can have along the way. So I'm just going to keep on writing the Singing Hills cycle as long as people keep letting me.
Which is amazing for us. And it is great how they're standalones because I read EMPRESS way back when. So it must have been at the exact start of the pandemic when everyone was extremely sad. And I was like, oh, this little jewel of a Chinese palace drama, or not Chinese, Asian palace drama has like popped into my inbox. And it was the most delightful little surprise. And I haven't actually read Tiger, but then this one came out and I could like leap back into the world with this feeling of great pleasure, which is it the same world as your short story? What's it called? Boiled Eggs and Bones or something like that?
I think for a few reasons I'm not allowed to say that it is, but it feels very similar.
Oh, okay.
How about that?
Yeah. So the premise of each of them is quite complete in and of themselves. Like Empress is this, it's like very big. It feels like a big story. It feels like an 80-episode drama compressed down into a jewel of a novella. And then you have this like lushly romantic second novella. And so this one, it's this adventure wuxia story about storytelling with lots of exciting action sequences and a lot of our favorite like set pieces. Like there's a tea house scene or tea house moment. Everyone loves a tea house. And I read somewhere that you start from premise, not from character or theme or emotion. So what was the premise of this one that like hooked you in?
I think the premise for Into the Riverlands is the same as the premise for nearly everything else I write, which is, wow, wouldn't it be cool if it's just random thoughts that quickly connect onto each other and suddenly there's a novel or a poem or, 2 a.m. chat with someone whose problem I have promptly made it, my poor friends. And the fun of writing Into the Riverlands is that it comes from a few different places. it comes from the fact that during the pandemic, I was also very into the Untamed, because I'm like, I'm just going to let this property have my brain and my heart, and it can just do whatever it wants with it. And it has deeper roots in the fact that when I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of TV with my grandpa, and I never quite understood why I could watch different TV with my grandpa than I could with anyone else. And I realized it was because we were watching bootleg VHS martial arts movies. Like, there would be this tall pile of, home labeled VHS next to the television, and we would just like pop them in one after another on weekday afternoons when I was very small. And I didn't speak Chinese at the time. I still don't. And so he would sort of try to narrate them for me, but then he would just kind of give up. So I sort of had to fill in the gaps where there was dialogue or what was going on. And I think Into the Riverlands came from that originally, which is just trying to make sense of something that doesn't necessarily need to make sense. I mean, I feel like as well as I do that a lot of the great wuxia dramas, it's like we are just getting by on vibes, and that's where we want to be.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that was a really good way to get us into the wuxia drama, especially because I too do not speak Chinese. But by the time I came into starting to access and watch those dramas, they had subtitles, which is this great innovation that did not exist in our childhood, which is why I never watched anything but crappy Jackie Chan action movies, Hong Kong action movies, TVB action stuff in my childhood, because I couldn't understand it. So I got to adulthood, started watching the wuxia classics that everyone was always like, you must watch, Return of the Condor Heroes. You have to watch all the Jin Yong. Such a great insight into Chinese philosophy. And they were too dense, actually. So I think that, there's all these sects, and I was always getting lost in who belonged to who and like what this particular martial arts move was supposed to like exemplify about the Chinese philosophical thinking behind it. And I think it would have been better to start off with that magical feeling of there's just a lot of stuff happening in the Jianghu, the wilderness, and like we're kind of like bandits who have been pushed out by corrupt society, and we're just like wandering around in this world of our own.
And being a kid, you just accept so much. Like,
yep.
Like, of course he came back as his own brother. This makes perfect sense to me. And then you become like, what? It's like, who is paying all these repair bills out here?
So Twitter is currently undergoing its implosion, but Twitter has brought me so much joy. And one of the joyful things I saw like about a year ago was this list of wuxia tropes. And it was like 30 or 40 of them. And it was just so delightful to go down this list and tick them off. I think even though my book was not wuxia exactly, it had a lot of the same tropes. And then when I was reading yours as well, I can tick off a few. And some of them are classics, like anyone who falls off a cliff is not dead, which I actually felt really bad about because I violated that rule in my book. And I was like, oh no, people are not going to think he's actually dead.
You allowed gravity to work in your book. Do not feel bad about that.
There's always like a moonlit scene of some kind. There's a roof. Someone's on a roof. They're drinking. Someone gets their pressure points, like acupuncture points, hit and falls down in a flop. Yes, and there's always a tea house. So I really enjoyed that. What's your favorite wuxia trope? Do you like have one that
you can't really beat drinking. You can't really beat drinking in the moonlight on a roof. You can't beat rooftop fights. You also can't believe. You also can't underestimate the appeal of two lovers parting at the 2/3 point, because you know that there's still like a third of the drama for them to get back together. Gotta love that. And you can't really beat the fun of a dramatic heroic sacrifice. Even if in real life you're like, that is the worst thing I have ever seen happen to a human being.
I find it interesting that you say the lovers who part and there's still a third to go and they'll get back together, because my favorite one is when the lovers say, we'll find each other again, and then they don't. And it's amazing. Which often works into that noble sacrifice. So but you really like a heart to be broken. What I really like about this whole explosion of Asian fantasies, Asian-inspired storytelling, like recently, is that we've got all the subgenres of Chinese storytelling coming into Western fiction. So, like, I was just saying that mine's not wuxia, but there's yours, and there's Zen Cho's Order of the Pure Moon, which it really reminded me of. That kind of adventure, but wuxias that are not set in China, which was interesting to me. But then we've got the cultivation fantasies, very much like Untamed. What was it? Amelie Zhao has a straight up cultivation fantasy coming out. And then you've got the palace dramas, and you've got like the Judy Lin has like someone who has tea magic, and they go into like a palace, and there's a lot of like who's poisoning whom. So that's what I'm really enjoying. Oh, and I feel like we have to talk about Lisa Huang and the Water Margin, the Water Outlaws, because you were saying
seen the picture go by
you were
on
inspired by
Twitter.
the Water Margin.
It looks so satisfactorily huge, and I'm like, yes, I'm just going to just pour my brain into that and just let that happen to me whenever it comes out, or if I can beg someone to get me an author's an ARC.
Do you think there's something about this whole wuxia found family business that's like particularly resonant for queer people? Because I'm like, you know, there's queerness in yours, there's queerness in hers. That's what it's all about.
I think queerness is a big part of it. And I mean, I doubt we'll ever really be past the queer narrative of finding yourself. But I think the joy of writing something like The Riverlands is it's the joy of finding yourself with other people. Because I'm someone who's spent a great deal of my life on my own, and that's mostly by choice, not always. And the idea of finding yourself with other people is so very significant and so very resonant because it's the pleasure of community, it's the pleasure of recognition, which you really can't have on your own, and it's the pleasure of validation, which I feel like queer people we're often looking for. And even after we've told ourselves we don't need it, I think the truth is that everyone needs it, and that's where the fun of found family and where the necessity of found family comes from, the pleasure and the need to be seen. And that's part of the fun of writing Into the Riverlands again, which is where people do get seen, whether they want to be or not. And, you know, they also get picked up for their priors if they're not careful.
Yeah, I think one thing that struck me about Into the Riverlands, especially at the end, which I will not get into too many spoilers about, is about that having of doubled identities. Like someone sees you and sees that you have your two identities layered over the top of each other, and both those identities are true in a way. But then there's also this element of you don't owe anyone a truth of yourself, which also struck me as like kind of like queer and diasporic at the same time. Like, you know, when you're diaspora in a mainstream Western society or a majority Western society, you know, you do have two identities that you put on and take off when you move in different spaces, and different people will see different sides of you. But it doesn't mean that any of these identities that you're inhabiting are false or formed necessarily. They're just, you know, there and layered, which I really enjoyed about your book. And because it's a found family, there's a variety of peoples from different walks of life, and they're seeing different aspects of each other. Was interesting to me.
I don't know. I feel like there's this piece that and it shows up in your work as well. When I read She Became the Sun, specifically the idea of obligation. Like, what do we owe? What part of ourselves do we owe to the world around us? And why does the world get to make that call of what we owe to it? If we're going to do the kind of service to the world that makes us who we are, that makes us the most fully realized version of ourselves who does the most good, that should be something that we give up, not something that is forced upon us, I think. And when it comes right down to it, once again, we're back in the diaspora, where, you know, there's all of the shattered identity narratives, like all the pieces of ourselves and what is false and what is real. And I'm so tired of that. I feel that a lot of diasporic writers, we're pretty bored of it and tired of it because, you know, it's not like I'm not someone who actually goes looking for an absolute truth. I think that's a very bad idea. But on the other hand, why can't every part of it be true? Why can't every part of me be authentic?
I think your Tiger book was about presenting two different stories, which can both be true in their own way, right? We just like, let's have it
all. And married, yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. Oh, yeah, I'm tired of these stories where you have to proclaim something, you have to teach something, you have to illustrate some important moral. I just want to have a fucking good time and bring everything that we are to the page without having to explain everything.
Without validating a Western viewpoint as well, without always having to validate a Western viewpoint.
I think the West and maybe sometimes some parts of genre publishing are not super comfortable with the unresolved. You can just throw something out there and have it be contradictory and ambivalent. And I really enjoy that. You don't have to explain exactly what it is. You don't have to nail it down into a this, that, or the other. But then people are like, oh, they might be confused, or is this bad representation? It's like, no.
I think I'm kind of going away with it entirely based on vibes, actually, because I will say that I have a vague idea of what people read my stuff for, and one thing that I'm pretty sure folks read my stuff for is because I write very prettily, and I seem to be getting away with a lot just in terms of sheer style, and I'm like, I'm going to keep writing that as long as I can. Let's just hide the fact of how shattered some of these narratives and some of these endings are. And maybe we can just hide the fact that I'm very bad at plot.
But you're so good at prose. So good. And that's what I want to ask you about.
That's exactly how I've been coasting along this whole time.
Coast through on vibes. I feel like vibe is the wrong word for your prose. I feel like it's like this so scalpel sharp. It like says the thing exactly, and there's never any fat. And what I want to know is, does it come out of your brain that way, or do you write vibes and then you're scalpeling away, carving it away until it's this pristine and perfect thing that says exactly the thing?
It actually comes out like that. I write very fast, and
stop. Okay, no, just stop talking. I didn't actually want to know the answer.
You'll love why I write fast. I used to get paid per word as a copywriter and as ghostwriter, right? And my first few writing jobs were writing things like ebooks full of cockroach care manuals and vacuum cleaner parts, and having to nail how a vacuum cleaner will change your life forever actually doesn't make you pretty good at prose. So actually, it does sort of just spill out of my head like that, and later on, it has to be someone like Roshi Chen or Dinah Fox to say, so Nghi, do you even know what you're writing about? I'm like, no, should I? And the editing really does help me sort of scale things back and stop saying horrible things like, I have this entire trunked novella where the premise is not eating a child, and that's trunked for a reason,
Oh, well. Oh, I had this. I thought it was a genius idea. Which revolved around a child murder, and I pitched it to my agent, and she just very gently said, I think you have to be aware that many people are going to be put off by the idea of child murder. No matter how righteous your heroine is, especially a mother murdering her child. She's like, I think this may be a bridge that many people will not want to cross. And I was like, oh, but my genius. Just like, I mean, God, you can write your genius, but just be aware that the great white book clubs of America will not be reading this book. I'm like, fine.
Look, I'm just saying, if Billy and Finn can do it, I feel like we can do it.
Oh, yeah. What else is on my list of things that I must ask you about? Alex Harrow said of you in her recent newsletter, which I don't know if you saw or not, you got a name check. She said, she was talking about authors who evoke the body really well on page. So I guess while we're talking about prose, she was like, oh, Nghi Vo adores a body, revels in every bead of sweat and sharp tooth. And I was like, oh, screw you, Alex. That was an excellent way to describe another author. Yes, but do you feel like your characters come to you embodied? Like, do you think it's important that they live in bodies? Because like sometimes in the vibes-oriented fiction, you don't have to have a body or character. You just have to have feels.
Sometimes that gets you through, but I feel like it is so useful as a writer to know exactly what vehicle everyone is driving through the world. And it influences how the other characters look at them. It influences what they're capable of. I mean, I have to live in a body, and I will be living in one for the foreseeable future, fingers crossed and all. But I have definitely gone through stages where it has not been my friend. I love the idea of loving your body. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's impossible all the time to every day love your body. it's much more, I think it's much easier to think about what your body can do for you and what you can do for it. Love is difficult, and love implies a kind of absoluteness that I've never been very comfortable with. But part of it is the fact that I think I just like bodies. You know, everyone I have loved has had a body, for example. I don't always see it, but I know how their bodies affect them. I know how their bodies affect me. And I think knowing bodies is the first step towards having a good time with them, however you want to have a good time with them, whether it's food, sex, martial arts, the fun of seeing something, the fun of touching something. And it is such a mistake to think that there's any sort of standard body. And once you get away from that standardized idea, you start looking at bodies like Kothi Tao in When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. She basically is a tiger in a human's body. She's very, very sturdy. She's very strong. She's kind of short and very thick in every respect. And someone noticed that that she actually has a belly that sort of hangs down. And someone said, "Oh my God, is that a tiger's primordial pouch?" And I'm like, yes, that is meant to stop her from getting gutted. And that was a very good day for me.
So what, on the subject of bodies, that interested me about your book was that your clerics are non-binary. And, you know, this figure to me, which has always been very attractive to me, is of the female monk slash nun slash cleric with the shaved head when you're taking off your gender and entering into a different society. So because, you know, when you enter a monastery, I suppose you are putting aside your family connections, you're putting aside all your worldly concerns, you are taking away your hair, your connection to your ancestors. And if you're a woman, I suppose you're taking away any attractiveness, you're taking away something that's seen as, you know, a virtue, beautiful, long, beautiful hair. But you still have a body despite all of that. So just, you know, it's interesting for me to think about. You can renounce your gender, but you're still embodied. And this, in your world, I think that demonstrates it beautifully. As your cleric, you know, moves around through the world, they are still very much there, even though they have, you know, set aside some things. They haven't set aside their body.
I think the idea, I mean, I came up with the idea of Chi being non-binary, of the whole Singing Hills Order being non-binary very quickly, because it was one more thing they could put aside, especially in the name of gaining access to places they might not otherwise have access to. There are, you know, this is the fact that I can put Chi into a harem romance really makes me very happy. The fact that there are specifically sex segregated martial orders that we'll hopefully be seeing sometime in the next few books. The fact that she can basically wander around and not get too many questions about themselves. Part of it was access. Part of it was just the pleasure of having a character whose gender concerns are basically at an angle to most of the world they live in, because the world of Singing Hills, the Empire of On, is very patriarchal. It is still very binary. And then you have a character who has some license to be apart from that, to both observe it and also to do what they want to do. And that's the fun of Chi for me, and also the fun of Singing Hills, because we haven't really met other clerics from the Singing Hills Order. But one thing we quickly realize is that that is an abbey that has a very secular bent in some ways. They do pray, they do perform exorcisms, things like that, other duties that that religious people in their world do undertake. On the other hand, they're also much closer to sort of a renegade university. Like back in The Empress of Salt and Fortune, they talk about the fact that they've actually been banished off the continent for about 100 years before the Empress lets them back in. And I think that's an important part to remember of who Chi is as both a person and as they embody their job.
Well, while we're on the topic of bodies, I guess you have occasionally described this book as, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it. Was it a book of ugly women? Or like the story of ugly women or something like that?
Ugly stories. That's actually what I wanted the title to be. Actually, I came up with that. I'm like, wouldn't that be a fun title? And they're like, you know, if you say it's stories, they'll expect more than one. I'm like, but it's such a great title.
And there's this great line in the book. It was, forgive me if I misquote it, like, if you're not ugly, or women have to be ugly or beautiful to appear in the stories. But yeah, that's your only two choices if you're to be worthy of a narrative or to be interesting to a narrative.
What I've been doing for a little while now is I stopped using words like ugly or beautiful or handsome to describe people in my books, and I'm not sure anyone's noticed yet. So instead, I've been actually describing how other people react to them, and everyone else. And when I have to describe someone, it just ends up I try to use fairly neutral language, and it has actually done some really interesting things to my writing. It doesn't make things clearer, but it makes me work harder. And when I mentioned this to someone else, they said, you're making your reader work harder too. And I'm like, they're smart. They can handle that. I'm sure they can handle that. But it is very interesting looking at the reviews and seeing who calls who beautiful. Like the scholar from When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. I've seen people call her beautiful, and her tiger wife calls her beautiful. But I mostly describe her as, friends I've had who are kind of tall and lanky and very, very narrow. And I mean, I've definitely thought people like that were gorgeous, but that's not a word that I used in the book, and that ended up being very interesting for me.
I guess beauty is a kind of power that we exert in the world. So instead of describing, just saying beautiful, you are describing, well, the effects of that power. I don't know. I struggle with this because I'm the opposite. I've gone the lazy way of just describing everyone as beautiful.
No, I don't think that's lazy. I think that's we have this weird power as writers where we're telling them, if you tell me that someone is beautiful, I tend to believe you. But there's also this other interesting way to do it, and I've just been playing with that. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I use beauty in my books, much like you had another comment. It was like, if you can't see the wire work in my book, I feel like I've failed. And I always say that if you can't see the polyester wigs in my book, then well, you should be able to see that everyone's wearing like beautiful polyester clothes with a gorgeous wig and 100% fake.
And
everyone's very beautiful, and you should imagine the glycerine tears flowing,
Yes.
and that's part of the effect. But no, I really like the idea of being far more specific in how people look and then how people react to that, because that tells a lot about the onlooker as well as the person, like what their preferences are, what they are attracted to, what dynamics there are,
and what characters call each other.
There's many ways of being beautiful in the world. Just saying the single word kind of flattens it out. But no, I'm learning things as we go. That's my slightly stunned expression of like, I have to take this away.
No, it's a really cool idea.
Utilize it.
Who gets to be beautiful, and who says that someone else is beautiful? Because Mat Khan in Into the Riverlands, he calls his wife beautiful all the time, and as far as he's concerned, of course she is.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
I think I enjoy the power of the word ugly, almost like as like a shock. And I like using it in conjunction with people's feelings of attractiveness towards a character. Like my protagonist is ugly, and I have often used the word ugly. And I think that has more power sometimes than me just describing her features as being a little bit like insect-like.
It's a world.
I like the conjunction of that with people who like then look at her with feelings of attraction because of the power that she wields. So anyway, I'm thinking about this now.
No, there's a lot to unpack. I'm probably not done with it yet. In books to come.
Sorry, this is just me picking your brain randomly for like a writing masterclass. Sorry, random people watching. What else should I ask you about? I want to ask you about Mean Girls.
Oh, right.
I don't think there's anything mean in this book, actually, but I feel like it's this really fun characteristic of enough of your writing that I feel like I associate it with you for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's just like the one book of your Great Gatsby retelling. But what is meanness? Why do we feel like it's feminine associated? What's the appeal? I want to know about this because I feel like I don't see it enough.
There's definitely something to pick out there, because when we think about mean, we mostly think about it's not mean boys, it's mean girls. Boys get to be
It is.
cruel. Boys get to be brutal.
Mm.
Girls are mean and girls are catty. And part of it is, I mean, anyone who's been on the wrong side of a mean girl absolutely is going to know what kind of power they hold. The power to make you feel lesser, the power to make you feel about, you know, an inch high, or to stop you from doing what you want to do. But then you turn it around and you know, there's no real excuse for malice. But when we say mean girl, we're actually talking about what feels a lot more like a skill set. You know, like I feel like that's part of the narrative we've got around mean girls. Not only are they malicious, but the fact is they're using words and they're using gestures basically honed to a knife point. Like, how often have we heard that described? Like, mean like a knife, or with a very pointed cruelty. And mean girl is a skill, at least narratively. We're leaving aside like the horrible reality of bullying, of course. But in a narrative fashion, when you have someone who's a mean girl, there's a kind of honed power and malice there. And that's the fun of writing them, I think, which is the fun of writing Jordan and less the fun of writing Luli. Luli is just trying to get by, but yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting to me. This idea that the mean girl has a superior understanding of the people that she's wielding her power against, whereas cruelty can be dumb. Cruelty can be stupid.
Cruelty is instinct.
Petty cruelty. Yeah, or instinct. I feel like you can have very intelligent cruelty as well, but meanness implies that I have thought about this and I have identified where your particular weaknesses are, and I'm going to unerringly find them.
And meanness is foresight. Like that's part of it. Like, you remember all those terrible plots that, you know, from the 80s and 90s movies. The classic one is the humiliation of Carrie. You know, the bucket of pig's blood. That's premeditated malice. That's not just, you know, it's not just blind cruelty.
Also, mean can be funny. Can cruelty be funny? I don't think cruelty, there is a vicarious delight in watching meanness.
There's vengeance. There's actually a pleasure in vengeance, which, I mean, once again, Wuxia definitely helps us with.
Yes, Wuxia and the vengeance. Can we have a plot without a good revenge for someone's father being killed? I don't know.
I don't know if I can
have you seen Word of Honor?
Oh, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
Have you seen Word of Honor? I was just thinking,
Not yet. That's actually next on my list, along with I think the Love of a Devil and a Fairy. I think that's the big one.
Oh yeah, that's the other big one.
Yep.
Okay, we're coming up on half an hour. Oh, I want to say one more thing.
Oh, sure.
I want to talk about the power of aunties in your book. So the delight of found family in your book, as different from other found families I have read, it's a multi-generational situation. And there was one particular interchange that I was like, this is perfect. It was where the auntie figure suddenly is struggling with her load, but she doesn't say, young people, will you help me? It's more like,
of course not.
Oh, my poor bones, this is so heavy. And everyone's like, please let me help you. But then she's actually done it because so her hands will be free, so she can then do other things with her hands later. So it's like that multi-layered auntie superpowering of manipulating all the people around you and having a superior knowledge and being very pragmatic and competent. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, just to say that it was cool.
It's just making me think of the first time that basically a family friend called me auntie. And I'm like, I beg your pardon? That is a weird moment. It really is.
Oh,
it's both the realizing of cool. This is my new role in life. And there's the moment of shock because ageism is a thing. And then there's the moment where you just look at the kid who called you auntie and you're like, I have to protect you forever now. It's nearly instinctive. It's wonderful. It is a weirdly pleasurable moment.
It does feel a little like I have finally come into my powers, although I regret that there is not a non-binary word for auntie yet. That's been my bugbear. I don't mind being old. I look forward to having my, slightly overbearing competence recognized within the family.
I'm trying to just get the kids in my life just to call me Nghi, and that I don't think their parents are really comfortable with that quite yet. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Just call me Nghi. It's fine. And they're like, there's this look of discomfort. I'm like, okay, I'm still enough of an asshole that I think this is funny. So yeah, let's just keep doing this. This is great. But I still very much lose who's going to pay dinner, who's going to play for dinner game. But I have started winning it with some of my younger relatives. So I mean, I feel like that's only making me more powerful as time goes on.
I have a friend of mine who, really suffered the experience of being like, oh, now I have to give the red packets. What? How come I'm not the one receiving the money anymore?
See, I'm unmarried, so theoretically, I think I don't have.
Oh, you should still be receiving
but I think
them.
I'm still off the hook for that.
Anyway, let's okay, here's a question that I was going to ask you anyway. It's about are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Let's see. Among them are definitely Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I learned a lot about writing from Neil Gaiman. I feel like Terry Pratchett probably just made me a better human being. Angela Carter is definitely a masterclass in how to say the most with a very small joke, probably a crude one. Patricia Highsmith, because we can't get enough of awful people who we still want to read about. Let's see. And a lot of it has been sort of internet reading. You know, the small stories that people tell each other on sites like Tumblr or Facebook, or just, that's it. It's not exactly it's definitely not an oral tradition. It's definitely a written tradition, but there's something about stories that are passed on very, very quickly and that are very ephemeral that I think have influenced the way I write a great deal. Like, if I can't keep your attention for, 400 words, then I need to go fix that. And that's another part of the fun of writing novellas, because I feel like everyone's attention span is just shot to hell lately. So I'm like, look, you only have to be with me for 20,000 words at most.
Yes, I am struggling to read whole novels at the moment, and 100 pages went down just nicely. It was one session in the bathtub, and I was just like, I flick through this, I finish it, I'm done. It was a good time for sure.
It's a pretty good promise I get to make people. I'm like, look, it's 20,000 words. That's all you need.
Do you read the same things for inspiration as you do for fun, like of, contemporary authors, as opposed to the ones that shaped you?
I think mostly I just read whatever I can get my hands on, which is, if it's in my house, I'm going to be reading it regardless. So, people should be careful of what they leave in my house. But I mean, I read more nonfiction than I used to as a kid. Like, I've been recently rereading this book on anatomical beauties, which are these incredibly lifelike wax models of the interior of bodies from, I believe, the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. And they are creepy because wax has the same translucence that flesh does. And otherwise, they're like these beautiful women who are vivisected. And you can see both the problems of their bodies, and some of them are specifically have fetuses inside. And it's an incredibly explicit horror show with the weird tinge of, once again, human beauty. So you're just like, this is a lot of very conflicting influences within me right now. And, that's how I've been having fun. So, I mean, that's a special kind of fun, I guess. It is enjoyable reading, but it's also pretty disgusting.
I think disgust is an underrated emotion in propelling both stories and, that curiosity of wanting to learn more about the world. I'm all about disgust.
I have never been a kid running after the other kids with a worm on the playground.
I was down at Mona, which is this fantastic museum in Tasmania, and they have the most viscerally upsetting art that I've ever seen in my life, but it's amazing. And they had a sculpture made of wax. And I really knew what you were talking about when you said that sort of translucency of flesh, because it is of someone's body. And it was made from a living person. But once it's been turned into wax, he appeared as dead. But every little detail of his body was there. And I remember being so struck by the pressure point on the base of his heel. When you're slightly older and you've been like walking around a lot, and like the skin kind of thin and a different color. And it had been so perfectly rendered in the wax that I felt like I was like really viewing a corpse of someone who had lived. And it was
it's disorienting, isn't it? It's deeply disorienting. Fantastic.
Anyway, wax. Okay. Are either of you working on NaNoWriMo projects, or have you participated in the past?
I accidentally pitched something to my agent a couple weeks ago, and so I'm working on that. I've only succeeded at NaNoWriMo once. I actually can't even remember what it was, and I haven't done it since. How about you?
I like how you accidentally pitched something, and now you're immediately on the hook to write it. Oh, you have a short story coming out. Is that out yet?
Oh.
The Amazon series of short stories?
I think. Yeah, it's
exciting.
It's 9,000 words. It is Gilded Age ghost stories set in a girls' seminary in the Midwest. I'm very excited by it.
And the covers are gorgeous. That whole series has a fantastic series, which did make me think they were novellas or something. I have rarely seen such cool covers for short stories, I think. Yeah, and I'm not doing NaNoWriMo because I can't write fast to save my life. It would just... I actually have to do the equivalent of a double NaNoWriMo this month to make my deadline. So
you've got a deadline coming up.
Got deadline. So yeah, it'll be done because it will have to be done.
That's what deadlines are for.
Yes. Otherwise, I would fiddle with it for at least another year. But that's not the way the commercial process goes.
That is not the way
what do you
paid,
find the most?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, if you want to get paid, I know. It's been so long since I sold my book that I kind of forgot that I'll actually get another payment when I hand in this manuscript. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I have a reason. What's the most challenging part of writing for you?
The most finishing. It's always finishing. Like, I think word count is important. Editing is actually kind of fun for me, but I also have the benefit of I write fairly completely and fairly cleanly. So
stop.
I've had to throw things out, but I've seldom had to go into some of the torturous editing processes that some of my friends have done. Honestly, finishing it, if I can get it finished, I can do something with it. You know, it might need to be recycled, it might need to be tossed, but if I can get it finished, and I've actually finished very few things in my career across the board. If I can get it finished, that's the big challenge for me.
And that's another vote in favor of the novella, I guess, or short stories.
Yes, so.
It's easier to get to that finish line.
It is.
I wish I could write short, but I don't seem to have the knack.
I can tell you how I learned, actually.
That
would help.
Yeah.
I spent basically nearly 2 years writing a 100-word story every day. That really helped, actually. That was pretty instrumental, I think.
Oh, drabbles. Is that what we used to call them?
Yeah, back in the day, yeah.
Had to be exactly.
They used to be on LiveJournal, actually.
Ha! So yeah, okay. Yeah, even when I was writing fanfic, all my stories are really long, like so much longer than they actually needed to be.
You are doing a service in the fanfic community. Everyone loves reading long fic.
Do they though? I don't click on anything over 80,000 words. I'm just like, no, that's a novel. Yeah. Oh, finishing. Is that my problem? No. My problem is that I endlessly... I find it so hard to understand what people are thinking and feeling that I will just go over the same paragraph over and over and over again. And I have to write every wrong permutation until I find... I'm like, oh, that's the right one. And I only had to write it 32 times to find the right version.
Have you ever heard the
fucking driving nuts.
Have you ever heard the thing where we don't actually decide to do things, we just do things and then retroactively decide why we did them? A lot of my characters function like that, and that's been very helpful.
Oh, I realize I probably should not have said the word Amazon in a indie bookstore. Buy all your books from indie bookstores. The only reason, this is a short story, and it would not have been available in the indie bookstore. Anyway, sorry, I just felt like I had committed some terrible betrayal. What's on your TBR pile right now?
To be read. Let's see. I'm still wading through that book on the anatomical Venuses. Let's see. I am just finishing up. Sasha Lamb's When the Angels Left the Old Country, which is utterly fucking delightful. Have you heard about this? It's
tell me more.
It's this angel and this devil who are Torah study partners from the Pale in Europe. And this is at the turn of the century. And they decide for various reasons to come to America. It's little Ash and Uriel, and they're adorable. It's the best coming to America story that I've read in a very long time. And it makes all of my little immigrant feelings just kind of beat out of my chest. And it's adorable. And despite being a kind of a brutal book, it's still very gentle. It can be both.
And there's a link to it
Oh,
conveniently.
yeah, there we go. No, and Sasha Lamb's.
I always miss titles, so now I'm like looking and go, oh, how nice it's been provided. What have I been reading? Oh,
Yeah.
I read this amazing book. I don't know. Do I get to plug stuff too? I'm going to anyway. Oh, it's on my bookcase. I'm wondering if I could go grab it. No. It's called Lucky Red by Claudia Cravens. And I don't know if any of you have ever watched the Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode in which there is a non-binary space pirate who takes people's identities and is an absolute wretch and is a villain and queer, but not a villain because queer. And it's that feeling, but in a book that's set in the West. It's like a Western. So it's set in this frontier town, this dusty frontier town, where the protagonist starts life as a very successful prostitute. And it's amazing.
That sounds
But
awesome.
so you should really look out for it. So it's not science fiction or fantasy. I don't know why it ended up on my doorstep, but it feels like it. It has that really propulsive adventure. So it's like gunslingers and successful prostitutes and double crosses and backstabbings and betrayals and jaunts across the, what's it called, prairie. I was about to say the moor, but it's a prairie. It's fantastic.
I feel like Quentin C.P. Morris, if we just added like a cowboy to like Pride and Prejudice or to Wuthering Heights, I'd be into that.
More things could do with pirates, bandits,
Outlaws.
things like that. Outlaws, yes. So, I mean, wuxia is all about the outlaws.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are technically, they're not part of proper society. They are.
Can you imagine trying to
the
run a
margins.
province with these assholes running around?
And also the vigilante justice aspect. The kind of like, there's some very harassed bureaucrat in the Ming dynasty who's just like, these guys taking the law into their own hands.
I just want to see some.
I'm just trying to be a governor.
Just hand governance over to the random sect that's been like, righting wrongs. It's like, okay, now you get to handle the roads.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of all for the whole idea of these people have been ejected by the corrupt government of the time and they're trying to make a living in the marshes or whatever. But often these sects are the fucking like worst run things I have ever, like there's so much backstabbing, there's so much
Nepotism.
it's always the noble sect leader who turns out to be the bad guy in disguise, right? It's always like,
Right.
oh, noble leader, and all of a sudden you've been the one running the demonic, sect cult thing.
Honestly, it's
Yeah,
just like running
so-
a nonprofit. That's like every nonprofit I've ever been a part of.
Yeah. They have cool outfits though. I do love, like, when you talked about gender segregated sects in the Singing Hills world, I was like, we do love a nun. Or like, those fighting nuns they often have in wuxia series. They've all got the veils and the hats, and they're always wearing black, and they're really badass. Which I have put in my sequel. I do have a sect of fighting ladies. I think that's probably, is that it for us? Shall we just keep asking questions till our time is up? Or how are people feeling? Anyway, what are your favorite tropes? Do you love a trope?
I
Don't
do
you love
love
a trope?
We all love tropes. Let's see. I read enough romance that there's only one bed is never ever going to get old, no matter what genre you're in. I think. I love a good villain redemption if they do it right, of course. And I just love, and I like my queer villains. Honestly, I'm a '90s kid. That's exactly where I'm like. That's where all my queer role models are, and I'm just gonna say that. Yeah, it's like that's the role model right there. That's what we want.
Yeah, we want the camp villainy that's completely self-aware and just having a lot of fun with it. I'm like, screw you. I'm just
I
gonna
feel like
chew the
villains must be
scenery
more
and be
self-aware than
amazing.
heroes
and-
ever get to be.
Oh, who's putting my my secret title that I was trying to keep secret? So it popped up in the sidebar. No,
Should we
it's
pretend I didn't see it because that's an awesome title.
no. Once things leak out from the catalog into the world, it's a free for all. I was going to announce it, and then Twitter imploded, and then who cares about title announcement really?
What are you gonna do after
anyway.
your deadline? After everything's turned in, what are you gonna do?
I'm taking a vacation, and oh my god, I called my mother the other day. She's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, you know, I have to like hand in this book," and she's like, "Well, you'll have to be planning your next book." And then she took a beat and she said, "But you deserve a vacation." And I was like, "She's learning, like the Asian mothers can learn." Yeah. Anyway,
Or have you just had
her
that
first
rough a
response
time
was, "You
lately?
just should keep working."
Or have you just had that rough a time lately? Oh my god.
No.
Mm.
Anyway, it's a rough life. I don't know. I mean, we are doing what we love for profit and I don't know, friends and profit. I'm not saying any friends. I'm just living in my
I
cupboard.
only have like 10 friends, so actually, yeah, I can do it for them. That's fine.
All my friends lived on the internet, and now Elon Musk has taken it away from us. So, thanks, Elon.
I just want to see where Twitter goes. Like, where's everyone? It's like, so I'm like, this is the closest to sort of a mass diasporic event I've seen on the internet. And, I was there for a live journal.
Yeah, I was about to say live journal. Went to Dreamwith, then I missed Tumblr entirely, and now we're all going back to Tumblr. So, that's a pretty good revenge story. Tumblr was sold eventually for $3 million, and now it makes its comeback. I like, full circle.
Can't argue that.
And we do have one more question, so I may as well do the clean sweep. What's your advice for people wanting to become writers?
How about know what you want your life to look like? Do you like being a writer is much more of a lifestyle than I thought it would be. And of course, if you want to be a writer, you should figure out how writers live and whether you want to live like that. But when it comes to writing advice, which I'm much better at, finish stuff because everything can come out in editing. And for the love of Christ, don't talk badly about people. Everyone else who's writing around you, they're not your competition. They're definitely your colleagues. How about that?
That is sensible life advice in general. Don't backstab your colleagues. I mean, there is that. I feel like with writing, writerly envy is definitely the thing that people have to struggle with because of this mentality of there can only be one, or there's only limited publicity dollars.
You want to talk about writer envy? I saw the cover for She Who Became the Sun, and I'm like, I think I swore for like a minute.
You should have heard me when I was writing She Who Became the Sun and the Poppy War came out. I was like, I cried.
Here we are. And we need to get over that whole there can only be one of us thing, because that's a terrible one. I feel like everyone I've talked to has, oh my God, it's like someone else is doing something vaguely like me. I'm like, no, there can be many of us. It's okay.
You're opening the doors for other people. Rising tide lifts all boats. I don't know. Anyway, I'm excited by this wave of Asian fiction. I don't think it's a trend. I don't think it's something that will run out. There's all the room for all of us. Yeah. Do I have any writing advice? No. And we're getting kicked off anyway.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Well, I hate to cut us short, but it seems like we've gotten to the end of our questions here. I gotta say, definitely agree with everything said at the end there. And anyone who knows and has been into the store knows that a lot of those are my staff picks. So as I say, please bring on more and more Asian fiction. Everything has been so lovely lately. And this event has been lovely. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our audience. One more time, I feel like it's my job to plug both of your books. You can do so by purchasing the links in the chat, or if you click the green button, it will take you to Nghi's books. The webpage for the event, like I said, you will be getting signed book plates for Into the Riverlands, and that also comes with the exclusive enamel pin, so don't miss out on that. We've got limited ones. And with that, thanks everyone, and have a great night. We'll see
Thanks
you
for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.